Okay, Hinia, we are now on chapter 11 of The Shining, and coincidentally, this chapter is also called The Shining. There were 4 bags in a pile just outside the door. 3 of them were giant, battered old suitcases covered with black imitation alligator hide. The last was an oversized zipper bag with a faded tartan skin. "Guess you can handle that one, can't you?" Halloran asked him. He picked up 2 of the big cases in one hand and hoisted the other under his arm. "Sure," Danny said. He got a grip on it with both hands and followed the cook down the porch steps, trying manfully not to grunt, give away how heavy it was. A sharp and cutting fall wind had come up since they had arrived. It whistled across the parking lot, making Danny wince his eyes down to slits as he carried the zipper bag in front of him, bumping onto his knees. A few errant aspen leaves rattled and turned across the now mostly deserted asphalt, making Danny think momentarily of that night last week when he had awakened out of his nightmare and heard, or thought he heard, at least, Tony telling him not to go. Halloran set his bags down by the trunk of a beige Plymouth Fury. "This ain't much car," he confided to Danny. "Just a rental job. My Bessie's on the other end. She's a car, 1950 Cadillac. And does she run sweet? I'll tell the world. I keep her in Florida because she's too old for all this mountain climbing. You need a hand with that?" "No, sir," Danny said. He managed to carry it the last 10 or 12 steps without grunting and set it down with a large sigh of relief. "Good boy," Halloran said. He produced a large key ring from the pocket of his blue serge jacket and unlocked the trunk. As he lifted the bags in, he said, "You shine on, boy, harder than anyone I ever met in my life, and I'm 60 years old this January." "Huh? You've got a knack," Halloran said, turning to him. "Me, I've always called it shining. That's what my grandmother called it too. She had it. We used to sit in the kitchen when I was a boy no older than you and have long talks without even opening our mouths." "Really?" Halloran smiled at Danny's open-mouthed, almost hungry expression and said, "Come on up and sit in the car with me for a few minutes. I want to talk to you." He slammed the trunk. In the lobby of the Overlook, Wendy Torrance saw her son get into the passenger side of Halloran's car as the big black cook slid in beside the wheel. A sharp pang of fear struck her, and she opened her mouth to tell Jack that Halloran had not been lying about taking their son to Florida. There was a kidnapping afoot. But they were only sitting there. She could barely see the small silhouette of her son's head, turned attentively toward Halloran's big one. Even at this distance, that small head had a set to it that she recognized. It was the way her son looked when there was something on the TV that particularly fascinated him, or when he and his father were playing an old maid or idiot cribbage. Jack, who was still looking around for Ullman, hadn't noticed. Wendy kept silent, watching Halloran's car nervously, wondering what they could possibly be talking about that would make Danny cock his head that way. In the car, Halloran was saying, "Get you kind of lonely thinking you were the only one?" Danny, who had been frightened as well as lonely, sometimes nodded. "Am I the only one you ever met?" he asked. Halloran laughed and shook his head. "No, child, no, but you shine the hardest." "Are there lots then?" "No," Halloran said, "but you do run across them. A lot of folks, they got a little bit of shine to them. They don't even know it. But they always seem to show up with flowers when their wives are feeling blue with the monthlies. They do good on school tests they don't even study for. They got a good idea how people are feeling as soon as they walk into a room. I come across 50 or 60 like that. Maybe only a dozen, counting my gram, that knew they was shining." "Wow," Danny said and thought about it. Then, "Do you know Mrs. Brandt?" "Her?" Halloran asked scornfully. "She don't shine, just sends her supper back 2 to 3 times every night." "I know she doesn't," Danny said earnestly. "But do you know the man in the gray uniform that gets the cars?" "Mike? Sure I know Mike. What about him?" "Mr. Halloran, why would she want his pants?" "What are you talking about, boy?" "Well, when she was watching him, she was thinking she would sure like to get into his pants, and I just wondered why." But he got no further. Halloran had thrown his head back, and rich, dark laughter issued from his chest, rolling across the car like cannon fire. The seat shook with the force of it. Danny smiled, puzzled, and at last the storm subsided by fits and starts. Halloran produced a large silk handkerchief from his breast pocket like a white flag of surrender and wiped his streaming eyes. "Boy," he said, still snorting a little, "you are gonna know everything there is to know about the human condition before you make 10. I don't know if to envy you or not." "But Mrs. Brandt—" "You never mind her," he said, "and don't go asking your mom either. You'd only upset her. Dig into what I'm saying?" Yes, sir, Danny said. He dug it perfectly well. He had upset his mother that way in the past. That Mrs. Brandt is just a dirty old woman with an itch. That's all you have to know. He looked at Danny speculatively. How hard can you hit, Doc? Huh? Give me a blast. Think at me. I want to know if you got as much as I think you do. What do you want me to think? Anything. Just think it hard. Okay, Danny said. He considered it for a moment, then gathered his concentration and flung it out at Halloran. He had never done anything precisely like this before, and at the last instant some instinctive part of him rose up and blunted some of the thought's raw force. He didn't want to hurt Mr. Halloran. Still, the thought arrowed out of him with a force he never would have believed. It was like a Nolan Ryan fastball with a little extra on it. Gee, I hope I didn't hurt him. And the thought was, Hi, Dick! Halloran winced and jerked backward on the seat. His teeth came together with a hard click, drawing blood from his lower lip in a thin trickle. His hands flew up involuntarily from his lip to the level of his chest and then settled back again. For a moment, his eyelids fluttered limply with no conscious thought, and Danny was frightened. Mr. Halloran, Dick, are you okay? I don't know, Halloran said and laughed weakly. I honest to God don't. My God, boy, you're a pistol. I'm sorry, Danny said, more alarmed. Should I get my daddy? I'll run and get him. No, here I come. I'm okay, Danny. You just sit right there. I feel a little scrambled, that's all. I didn't go as hard as I could, Danny confessed. I was scared to at the last minute. Probably my good luck you did. My brains would be leaking out my ears. He saw the alarm on Danny's face and smiled. No harm done. What did it feel like to you? Like I was Nolan Ryan throwing a fastball, he replied promptly. You like baseball, do you? Halloran was rubbing his temples gently. Daddy and me like the Angels, Danny said. The Red Sox in the American League East and the Angels in the West. We saw the Red Sox against Cincinnati in the World Series. I was a lot littler then, and Danny was... Danny's face went dark and troubled. Was what, Dan? I forget, Danny said. He started to put his thumb in his mouth to suck it, but that was a baby trick. He put his hand back in his lap. Can you tell what your mom and dad are thinking, Danny? Halloran was watching him closely. Most times if I want to, but usually I don't try. Why not? Well, he paused a moment, troubled. It would be like peeking into the bedroom and watching while they're doing the thing that makes babies. Do you know that thing? I have had acquaintance with it, Mr. Halloran said gravely. They wouldn't like that, and they wouldn't like me peeking at their thoughts. It would be dirty. I see. But I know how they're feeling, Danny said. I can't help that. I know how you're feeling too. I hurt you. I'm sorry. It's just a headache. I've had hangovers that were worse. Can you read other people, Danny? I can't read yet at all, Danny said, except a few words. But Daddy's going to teach me this winter. My daddy used to teach reading and writing at a big school. Mostly writing, but he knows reading too. I mean, can you tell what anybody is thinking? Danny thought about it. I can if it's loud, he said finally, like Mrs. Brandt in the pants. Or like once when me and Mommy were in the big store to get me some shoes, there was this big kid looking at radios and he was thinking about taking one without buying it. Then he'd think, what if I get caught? Then he'd think, I really want it. Then he'd think about getting caught again. He was making himself sick about it and he was making me sick. Mommy was talking to the man who sells the shoes, so I went over and said, Kid, don't take that radio, go away. And he got really scared. He went away fast. Halloran was grinning broadly. I bet he did. Can you do anything else, Danny? Is it only thoughts and feelings, or is there more? Cautiously, is there more for you? Sometimes, Halloran said. Not often. Sometimes. Sometimes there are dreams. Do you dream, Danny? Sometimes, Danny said. I dream when I'm awake. After Tony comes. His thumb wanted to go into his mouth again. He had never told anyone but Mommy and Daddy about Tony. He made his thumb-sucking hand go back into his lap. Who's Tony?